Hey everyone, it's Vlad again as always. Today I'm breaking down what I personally think is the most amazing commercial in the world, or at least the most amazing alcohol commercial I've ever seen. The most interesting part about this ad is that you won't see any alcohol in it at all. To be exact, it's a Hennessy commercial. What appears before your eyes is just a stunning visual picture. Incredible music carries the whole sequence, and the story itself looks so unusual that it makes you stop and think. And then the question comes up, was this really? For me personally, this commercial isn't a commercial at all. Or at least, in this film you can see an attempt to touch one of the greatest mysteries of humanity. What waits for a person after death? That's probably one of the main riddles that has been stirring people's minds for centuries. But there's another mystery. What lies beyond our world? What is hidden behind the skies? A person who isn't interested in conspiracy theories will simply answer, there's space. And from the point of view of modern science, that's true. Space is the area beyond the atmosphere of celestial bodies. It isn't completely empty. It contains interstellar matter, mostly hydrogen, small amounts of other elements, cosmic rays, and electromagnetic radiation. We all know this perfectly well, but some people start asking questions. And I have a few doubts of my own. For example, sometimes in space you can notice things that look like air bubbles. Remember the launch of the Tesla Roadster by SpaceX, or the footage of astronauts going outside on spacewalks from the International Space Station? The question comes up, why do we sometimes see something that looks like bubbles? I'll say right away, this is only my assumption. Maybe these effects are explained by the peculiarities of the filming, light reflections, the way the cameras work, or image processing. The first thing that jumps out is the combination of two of humanity's greatest achievements. The creators of the ad seem to connect two worlds in one visual sequence. The world of height, conquering the atmosphere, and the world of depth, exploring the ocean. Why exactly like this? Why does this apparatus that looks like a stratospheric balloon end up in the water? Why does the parachute open and seem to collide with the surface of the liquid? It looks like something more than just a beautiful artistic device. Although maybe that was exactly the director's intention. But let's look carefully at the details. At the beginning of the film, the name Auguste Piccard appears. And this is where the most interesting part starts. Auguste Piccard was a Swiss physicist, inventor, and explorer of the atmosphere and the ocean depths. He really was an outstanding man. In 1931, he made the first flight in the world into the stratosphere in a stratospheric balloon. On May 27, 1931, Auguste Piccard and his assistant Paul Kipfer rose to an altitude of about 15,785 meters, taking off from Germany. During that flight, Piccard studied the upper layers of the atmosphere and cosmic rays. Later, he talked about his impressions of the view of Earth from that great height. There are different retellings of his words, but one statement is often repeated, that from above the Earth looked unusual. The horizon seemed curved, and the surface of the planet had an unfamiliar appearance. Some supporters of alternative theories connect this with ideas about a flat Earth or an unusual shape of the planet. But it's important to understand, observations from heights of tens of kilometers do not confirm those conclusions. At those altitudes, the perception of the horizon can be strongly distorted because of optics, the atmosphere, and the peculiarities of human vision. But the story itself is truly interesting. Piccard wasn't just an explorer of the atmosphere. Later, he switched to studying the depths of the ocean. And here, an amazing connection begins. In 1960, his son Jacques Piccard, together with American Navy officer Don Walsh, made the famous dive in the bathyscaphe Trieste into the Mariana Trench. They reached a depth of about 10,916 meters, the deepest known point in the world's ocean. It turns out to be an amazing story. The father went up to the borders of the atmosphere. The son went down, almost to the very bottom of the ocean. And it is exactly this contrast that may have inspired the creators of the commercial. Height and depth, sky and water, space and ocean. But let's return directly to the ad. If you look at it simply as a work of art, everything looks fairly clear. The creators took two stories. The story of conquering height and the story of conquering depth. One man tried to rise as high as possible above the earth. Others try to go as deep as possible under the water. And there's a certain symbolism in that, because human beings have always tried to go beyond the familiar. We look up into space. We look down into the ocean. But the more we learn, the more new questions appear. Now let's pay attention to the details of the film itself. In certain frames, some viewers find symbols that supposedly may point to a hidden meaning. For example, you can notice a ring that looks like a signet ring. Some people connect it with Masonic symbolism. Others pay attention to an image of an eye. But here it's important to remember, the human brain is built in such a way that we constantly look for familiar shapes in random images. This is called pareidolia. We can see faces in clouds, figures in shadows, or familiar symbols in abstract forms. So the presence of a similar image is not yet proof of any hidden message. But the topic of symbols itself is truly interesting. Masonic symbolism, for example, is widely known. The compass, the square, the eye, and other elements often appear in various works of art, architecture, and design. However, that still doesn't mean that every similar image is connected specifically with the Masons. Sometimes it's just an artistic device. But let's return to Auguste Piccard. His life really was unusual. He was a man who constantly tried to expand the boundaries of human possibilities. First, he explored height. Then he took up depth. And Piccard himself said that there was an amazing similarity between his stratospheric balloon and the bathyscaphe. At first glance, it seems strange. One device is meant for flying into the atmosphere, the other for diving underwater. But the principle is really similar. In both cases, a person is inside a sealed capsule. Outside is an extreme environment. In one case, almost a vacuum and low pressure. In the other, enormous water pressure. The main task is to create a safe space for the person inside. And that is exactly what unites these two apparatuses. Now the question arises, why did Piccard make so many flights in the stratospheric balloon? What was he looking for? Why wasn't one achievement enough for him? The answer is fairly simple. He was a researcher. Science develops precisely thanks to people who ask new questions. Every new flight gave new data. Every measurement helped us understand Earth's atmosphere better. Piccard studied cosmic rays, the properties of the atmosphere, and the conditions at high altitudes. At that time, such research was extremely important. Today, it may seem to us that an altitude of 2,030 kilometers is something ordinary. But at the beginning of the 20th century, it was practically the edge of the unknown. Airplanes of that time could not reach such heights. Even today, far from all aircraft are capable of rising to those marks. For example, the Soviet high-altitude fighter MiG-25 set many world records. In 1977 test pilot Alexander Fedotov, an especially prepared MiG-25, rose to an altitude of about 37,650 meters. It wasn't an ordinary production aircraft, but a specially lightened machine for the record flight. But the fact itself shows how extreme the altitude was that Piccard was trying to explore. It's interesting that the history of aviation and space exploration is truly connected with great risk. Many outstanding researchers died during tests. For example, Yuri Gagarin died on March 27, 1968, during a training flight in a MiG-15 UTI. The causes of the crash were discussed for a long time, and some details remained a subject of debate. But it's important to remember, test aviation has always been one of the most dangerous fields. Test pilots consciously worked at the edge of the capabilities of the technology. They checked what no one before them had checked. In the history of conquering height, there was another interesting episode. In 1961, the American researcher Victor Prather made an ascent in a stratospheric balloon to an altitude of about 34 kilometers. The flight went successfully, but the tragedy happened after the mission was already finished. During the rescue operation in the Gulf of Mexico, he died after falling into the water. His case is often cited as an example of how dangerous these experiments were. A person could successfully rise almost to the edge of space, but die after returning. And here an interesting thought arises. The more humanity studies the surrounding world, the more questions appear. We were able to rise tens of kilometers up. We were able to go down almost 11 kilometers. But between these two directions, up and down, a huge amount of the unknown remains. And that is exactly why these stories continue to attract us. Now let's pay attention to one more interesting topic that the creator of the commercial may be touching on symbolically. This is the topic of water. Why water specifically? Why does an apparatus connected with a flight into the stratosphere end up in the ocean? Maybe it's just an artistic device. But water has always had enormous significance in the history of humanity. From the most ancient times, it was a symbol of life, of the beginning and the origin of everything that exists. Many ancient cultures connected the appearance of the world precisely with the primeval water. For example, in ancient Egyptian mythology, there existed the primordial ocean Nun, a boundless water element from which the beginning of the world arose. In the biblical tradition, there is also the image of the separation of the waters. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." Of course, these texts cannot be viewed as scientific descriptions of the structure of the universe, but they show how deeply the idea of water was connected with people's ideas about the origin of the world. And now, let's return to space. There exists a popular idea. What if beyond what we see, something completely different is hidden? What if our idea of a universe is incomplete? Science constantly changes our views. Once people considered the Earth the center of the universe, then it turned out that our planet revolves around the sun. Later we learned that the sun is only one star among billions of others. Today we know that the universe is enormous, and the amount of the unknown in it is still colossal. But that doesn't mean that any fantastic hypothesis automatically becomes truth. The border between a scientific assumption and fantasy is very important. And it is exactly this border that makes topics like these interesting. We can reflect, ask questions, build hypotheses. But answers must be confirmed by evidence. Now one more moment. Some viewers pay attention to unusual images in space. For example, sometimes on photographs you can see structures that look like bubbles, waves, or liquid. But in outer space, there is no ordinary water in open form the way there is in the ocean. Vacuum, temperature, and pressure make these processes completely different. What seems familiar to us from earthly conditions can have a completely different nature in space. These can be ice particles, drops of cooling liquid, light reflections, image defects, or peculiarities of how the camera works. Space is truly full of mysteries, but the explanations often turn out to be no less amazing than the mystery itself. Now let's turn to another unusual phenomenon: noctilucent clouds. These are some of the most mysterious formations in Earth's atmosphere. They are located at an altitude of about 8,085 kilometers above the surface of the planet in the mesosphere. That is incredibly high. For comparison, airplanes usually fly at altitudes of about 1,012 kilometers. Auguste Piccard's stratospheric balloon reached about 16 kilometers. And noctilucent clouds are several times higher. These are the highest clouds in Earth's atmosphere. They appear in the upper layers of the atmosphere and are visible only after sunset, when the lower layers of the atmosphere are already in darkness, while the clouds themselves are still illuminated by the sun's rays. Their nature is still being studied. The first mass observation of noctilucent clouds happened in 1885, soon after the powerful eruption of the volcano Krakatoa. Some researchers assumed a connection between these events. However, today it is believed that noctilucent clouds have a more complex nature. They consist of tiny ice crystals that form around particles in the upper atmosphere. But it is exactly such phenomena that make people start thinking. How can ice exist at an altitude of almost 85 kilometers? How can water be there at all, where its existence seems impossible? The answer is connected with the peculiarities of the atmosphere. Even the most extreme conditions obey the laws of physics. And that is exactly what makes our world so amazing. Now let's return again to the main idea of the commercial. Space and water. Two completely different worlds. But if you look deeper, they are connected. Water is present in the universe. We discover ice on other planets and moons. Scientists find signs of the existence of water in various corners of the solar system. And water, as we know, is one of the key elements for the emergence of life. Therefore, the question of water beyond Earth is not just a fantasy. It is one of the main topics of modern science. But we can go even further and remember one interesting fact. The human body consists to a significant degree of water. Life on Earth arose in the ocean. The first complex forms of life appeared precisely in the water environment. And even the development of the human embryo takes place in fluid inside the mother's body. In this sense, water really is a symbol of the origin of life. And so an interesting chain appears. Water, life, human, the exploration of space, the search for answers to questions about the origin of everything that exists. Perhaps this is exactly the connection the creators of the commercial wanted to show. Or perhaps it is simply a beautiful interpretation. And in this lies the power of art. It makes us think. But let's return to the main question. What did this commercial actually want to say? I think each person will see something of their own here. For one person, it is simply a beautiful commercial with an unusual visual sequence. For another, a story about the great discoveries of humanity. And for someone else, a reason to think about the mysteries of our planet and the universe. And perhaps that is exactly where the main meaning of art lies. It doesn't always give ready answers. Sometimes it simply forces us to ask questions. We can remember one more interesting topic. Humanity has always tried to understand where the border is between the known and the unknown. We explored the oceans. We rose into the sky. We went out into space. But the farther we advance, the more we understand how enormous the world around us is. Even today, we don't know completely how life appeared. We don't know whether there are intelligent beings somewhere else. We don't know all the laws of the universe. And that is exactly what makes research so exciting. Sometimes people ask, if water exists somewhere beyond Earth, why don't we see it? The answer is fairly simple. If the water is far away, for example in the form of ice inside the moons of other planets, you can't simply see it with an ordinary telescope. Special methods of research are needed for that. Scientists analyze the composition of the atmosphere, the spectrum of light, the movement of celestial bodies, and other signs. Modern science searches for water not only with the eyes. It searches for it by the traces it leaves. Of course, you can build the most varied hypotheses. You can assume the existence of hidden worlds. You can fantasize about an unusual structure of the universe. You can view ancient myths as symbolic messages from the past. But it's important to remember, fantasy is the beginning of a question, not the end of an answer. It is precisely from bold questions that real discoveries sometimes are born. If you look at the history of science, many ideas at first seemed impossible. Human flight, travel into space, dives to the ocean floor, people connecting across the whole world in fractions of a second. Once all of this looked like fantasy, but then knowledge, technology, and evidence appeared. And now, let's return to the symbolism of the commercial itself. The stratospheric balloon rises upward. The bathyscaphe descends downward. One explores the sky, the other, the depths of the ocean. But both devices are united by one thing. A human being is trying to go beyond the limits of his familiar world. Above us waits space. Below, the abyss of the ocean. And in both directions, a huge number of mysteries remain. Space and water. This is a very distant hypothesis. It has no reliable scientific foundations in the form in which it could be presented as a fact. But as an idea for reflection, it is truly interesting. Water is the basis of life on Earth. We know that it exists in different forms in the universe. We know that the search for water is one of the main directions of space research. And we know that without water, our planet would be completely different. We can remember the ancient ideas about the origin of the world. We can remember the myths of different peoples. We can remember modern research of space. And in all these stories, we again and again meet one and the same theme. And in all these stories, we again and again meet one and the same theme. The search for the beginning. Where did everything come from? How did life arise? Why does exactly this kind of universe exist? And maybe that is exactly why these stories attract us so strongly. Because inside every person, there's a desire to learn more. We look at the stars and ask questions. We look at the ocean and ask questions. We look at ourselves and also ask questions. As for the Hennessy commercial itself, maybe it is simply a beautiful artistic film. Maybe the creators wanted to tell the story of two great achievements of humanity. Of a person who strives to know the unknown. Of the path upward and the path downward. But it is the viewer who creates the final meaning of the work. That's all for today. If you're interested in topics like these, space, mysteries of history, unusual phenomena, and reflections about the world around us, subscribe to the channel. So stay free and keep asking questions. See you.